we have resolved our technical difficulties, and we've got a quorum between those in the room and those online. So we welcome everybody. Let's real quick, if we can, for those who are here in the room, for our roll call, if you'd just give us your name, where you're from. Rosie.
Rosie Hernandez with Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Ted Knowlton, WFRC.
Dan Dugan, Salt Lake City Council.
Rob Daly, City of Holiday.
Andrea Pearson, WFRC.
Andrew Gruber, WFRC.
Wayne Benyon, also WFRC.
Mayor Natalie Hall, City of Bluffdale.
Jeff Acerson, Utah Transit Authority.
Karen Robertson, Utah Transit Authority.
Jeff Lewis, Utah Department of Transportation, Traffic and Safety Division.
Robert Miles, Utah Department of Transportation, Traffic and Safety Division.
Ivan Marrero, Federal Highway Administration.
Mike Babchuk, WFRC.
I'm Ned Hacker with Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Hugh Van Wagenen with Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Ben Withrich with Wasatch Front Regional Council.
And I'm Mark Shepard, Mayor of Clearfield City. And Andrew, would you tell us who's online?
Sure, we're actually going to have everyone introduce themselves. So let's start with Kevin. Why don't you start? Oh,
Kevin Cromar. Oh, do we have two Kevins?
Two Kevins.
my bad.
Let's have the smart Kevin go first. Go ahead, Kevin.
Kevin Van Tassel, Utah Highway Commission.
Yeah, Kevin Cromar, Air Quality Board.
Okay, great. And Mayor Tran?
Oh, hi, Tammy Tran, Kaysville City.
Mayor Palmer?
Everybody, Lauren Palmer, Harriman Mayor.
Colby?
Colby Oliverson, Governor's Office of Planning and Budget.
Mayor Lang?
Karen Lang, West Valley City Mayor.
Commissioner Harvey?
Jim Harvey, Weber County Commission.
Brad?
This is Brad Palmer, UDOT Region 2 Program Manager.
Wendy?
Wendy Thomas with Harbin City.
And Mayor Wikers?
Mike Wickers, Cottonwood Heights Mayor.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We have minutes to approve from our last meeting on April 14th. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes that were in your packet? So I'd entertain a motion on the minutes. But not by everybody at once.
I move we approve the minutes.
Rob Daly, second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? All right. Well, that brings us to our open public comment period. Is there anyone here from the public? No one announced themselves from the public, so I'm assuming no. We'll move on then. Let's turn some time over to Andrew Gruber. Boss?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And hello to everybody in the room. You get the cookies, and also to everybody online. Try to stay cool out there. What we're going to do, what our chair has invited me to do briefly today, is to talk a little bit about transportation funding. Some of you are really deep into this space already. Transportation funding. I'm just going to share my screen here, and voila. Some of you are already really deep into the space of transportation funding. But the reason that we want to talk about it a little bit with you all today is that this topic, it's always an important topic in our state, which was, as everybody knows, the fastest growing state in the nation over the past decade, making sure that we have enough transportation capacity and we have enough resources to maintain our transportation system in a good, safe, operable condition. So we would normally be talking about this, but also right now, there are a few particular things going on that make this topic particularly noteworthy. And those are that there is some legislative consideration of this topic area of transportation funding and investment. First, by the regular Transportation Interim Committee. And then secondly, and perhaps in a way more notably actually, because it's somewhat unusual, the Utah Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, which as some of you know is a body that was constituted just last year and is chaired by the governor, the speaker, and the president, and then made up with a whole collection of public and private sector leaders to look at Utah's growth issues. And one of the topics that they are looking at, and they have invited our collective participation in, is talking about transportation funding. And so over the next, let's say, 6 months or so, there's going to be a fair amount of deliberation and dialogue around transportation funding issues. So my point today is to give a little bit of an overview to this group about transportation funding in Utah. Why is it important, particularly to this group? Because Transcom, as you all know, has the responsibility for the WFRC region of programming and prioritizing funding that goes to projects over the course in the short term, over the next 4 to 6 years. Now, to be clear, you know, we don't do this alone as WFRC. It's done with UDOT and the Transportation Commission, with UTA, with the cities and the counties, but that's the focus of this group. Now, this has been talked about already at the WFRC Council meeting, at the UEOC Growth and Transportation Working Group, at the Joint Policy Advisory Committee meeting. So for some of you, you've seen this already, but you love it so much that you want to see it again. And then secondly, just in the interest of time, I'm gonna whip through this, Mr. Chair. And anybody can feel free to interrupt me to add in if anybody wants, but here we go. I think it's fair to say that the overarching goal for transportation funding is that we have long-term, stable, adequate, multimodal transportation funding. That sort of embodies all of the work that we do together writ large in transportation. And I'll note that last year, that Economic Opportunity Commission passed a motion essentially to do just that, to support continued investment in priority multimodal transportation options, right? And you know this, but by multimodal, we mean state and local roads, transit in all its forms, and active transportation, biking and walking as a means of transportation. Now, in Utah, all of this is embodied in Utah's Unified Transportation Plan. Utah is regarded, I think, fairly around the nation as a leader in collaborative long-range transportation planning. Ivan Marrero, our friend from FHWA, can vouch for that as he works with his folks around the country. We do this work where we look at all of those modes of transportation over a 30-year period. And again, we look at what's needed to satisfy and provide the capacity for that nation's leading growth, but we also look at what's needed to maintain and operate the system. What we are doing now is what we do in due course every 4 years of updating the transportation plan. We're preparing collaboratively the 2023 to 2050 Unified Transportation Plan. And we are evaluating and updating on the funding side, transportation funding for state and local roads, transit, active transportation, including, and I said this already, the adequacy of current funding sources in meeting the long-term needs for capacity enhancing projects, operations, maintenance, and preservation and state of good repair. So in other words, the sources that are in place today, think motor fuel tax, sales taxes, federal funds, et cetera, what will they do? What percentage of the needs will they cover? And then what else is still needed? So quick picture of a typical year in Utah. And I'm just going to note that this information is just a few years old, about 2019, 2020. But in an average year in Utah, this chart shows, hey, Mayor, shows how much money is spent from all sources on state roads, local roads, and transit. The relative size of the pie reflects the relative expenditure. And what you can see here is the colors represent the sources of funding. So if you look at state roads, about $1.5 billion, about 75% of that comes from state sources, which maybe makes sense. Gas taxes, vehicle registration, and then about a quarter of it comes from federal sources, from federal funding that comes in, which is mainly from the federal gas tax. Then on the local roads, so think city and county, and the city and county officials here, you know this well, the majority of the funding comes from local funding sources, local option sales taxes that the cities or counties have imposed, the general fund contributions that you're contributing. And then about a third of it comes from state funding sources. Most of that is from the B&C, the city and county share of the state gas tax that's coming to you. And then a slice coming from federal funding. That's mainly the money that passes through WFRC, the programs that we actually are going to be talking about later in this meeting. And then finally, on the transit side, the majority, again, is coming from local funding sources. Here, this is principally the local option, county option, sales taxes, and then also, of course, from the transit fare box. As Trustee Acerson and I were just talking about a moment ago, a lot of discussion now about the possibility of having free fares or zero fares, because it's not like it's free to operate. It's just a question of how much the passenger pays. A lot of discussion about that now as well. And then, of course, some federal funding that comes in for transit and formula grants, and then also in discretionary grants. So that's like a typical year in transportation now, okay? But now if we go start with 1 year, now let's look out ahead 30 years over the course of now out to 2050, which is the time horizon of Utah's Unified Transportation Plan. Again, state roads, local roads, and transit. On the state side, what you see is rounded about $46 billion. That's in today's dollars, 46, well, it actually goes back just a few years. With all the inflation, it's a little different, but in like, as of a few years ago, $46 billion. And what you see in the different colors, the sort of darker blue, the teal, is the revenue that we anticipate coming in from the sources that are in place right now. Again, motor fuel tax or its equivalent, sales taxes, et cetera. But the total needs, the priority needs, are actually not covered by those existing revenue sources. So if you then take what we collectively through our transportation planning process have identified as the highest priority needs above what would be funded with today's sources, you add on what you call planned new revenue that we anticipate could reasonably be added if additional actions are taken to generate more revenue. And then even on top of that would be remaining amounts needed. I guess maybe the point here is that we don't have enough revenue in place right now to cover all of the needs, which is in that sort of darker blue. On the local road side, it's a similar story, but you can see a slightly smaller percentage of that total need is covered by the sources that are in place right now. And then on the transit side, again, the same basic story, but you can note that maybe around half of the priority transit needs that have been identified are covered by sources that are in place right now. And without additional action, there would be significant transit needs for our growing population that we would not be able to meet. Okay, hopefully these layers of cake are making sense. If you add them all up, you get this donut, which the existing revenue comes to, I just went from cake to donut, I get that, about $74 billion from the funding sources that are in place today. There's a lot of assumptions that go into this in financial modeling, but there's we would need an additional $16 billion to cover the highest priority projects, and then even beyond that, another $17.6 billion. That 16.5 might resonate with some of you. Those of you that have been at this for a while, you'll remember in years past, that sort of priority shortfall number. At one point, it was around $11 billion, and it was $8 billion, and this reflects actions being taken. And then we added on our time horizon from 2040 to 2050, and the number climbs up. But these are intended to give an order of magnitude and help us collectively chart a course for what are the needs for transportation, and then how much revenue, what our current revenues will cover, and then what additional revenues we think we need. That's sort of the big picture point of laying all this out. Now, I said that was as of about 2 years ago, right? a lot of things have happened in the last 2 years. We're all aware of these, but that changed that funding picture. Appropriations from the state have generated over $2 billion in additional one-time investments into transportation. Most of that is for UDOT, for state roads, but some of that, and for the first time ever, are significant state investments in transit and also in active transportation in regionally important trails for transportation purposes. So if you think about it, that $2 billion would eat into that 16.5 billion. Okay, it would make it smaller. Then the federal legislation that passed relatively recently, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, will add about $500 million over our baseline, how much we are already expecting to get over the next 5 years. What's going to happen in the long term for federal funding? That's another question, right? But at least 500 million over the next 5 years. So that again would sort of take down that shortfall. Now, on the other side, if those first two bullets add money, the next two cause question. The impact of inflation, of tremendous inflation, means that our baseline costs to do these projects go up. If things cost more, the shortfall grows, or you can do less with the same amount of money. And then our projections, as we look out to the future, if your baseline goes up, your projected costs over the life of the plan are higher. So that eats away at how much we can accomplish with the same level of revenue. And then also, of course, the key question for all of us, the motor fuel tax, which has been the workhorse for transportation funding for near 100 years. What is its long-term viability? Its viability is in question. I'm happy to say that Utah and UDOT has been a real leader in this, is evaluating and actually now implementing our move toward a road usage charge, which actually is charged. A lot of you know this, right? It's charging based on people's distance traveled as opposed to the consumption of fuel. But we're ways off from actually having that instituted statewide, let alone nationwide. So all of these, and this is just some of the recent impacts to consider that go into our projections and analysis of the financial picture for Utah. Okay. Now, with all of that, here's just one starter list of key questions that this leads us all to. And this is the kind of list that the more you start looking at it, the more you realize more and more questions come to your mind. We collectively, as a region, as a state, as leaders and stakeholders, need to sort out answers to these questions in transportation spending over the next and funding over the next few years. Does the state TIF funding, Transportation Investment Fund, plus that recent one-time funding, is that sufficient for our state road capacity needs? What portion of our transit needs are covered by the new state TTIF? And then the local sources that are going into transit. We mentioned already free fare transit. What about the additional local option sales tax that is authorized in state law right now, 0.20 local option sales tax that the counties can impose, but have not done so on the Wasatch Front? Should there be an established and stable source of funding for active transportation? Or should that just be more have flexibility within the other funding streams? For the local governments in particular, to what extent do the B and C and the local option sales taxes cover your local needs? And what other options are possible to meet those needs? I mentioned this already, the viable time horizon for the motor fuel tax and transitioning to the road usage charge and policies, congestion pricing and tolling. And what about federal funds, formula funds, and discretionary competitive dollars? How can we best leverage them to support our needs? Are there other funding sources? You know, mostly in Utah, we typically don't use and don't project the use of a lot of private sources for funding, but could that happen more? Could the private sector contribute more through value capture or public-private partnerships? And then finally, what's a prudent use of debt as a tool to cover our needs and financing strategies? And of course, this is only a partial list of questions. So that again is just sort of a whirlwind tour overview, and hopefully that mostly made sense to most of you. I'm sure it did, as sort of an overview of the picture of where we're at with funding in Utah for transportation and some of the key issues we have to tackle. Mr. Chair, at your discretion, I mean, I'd be happy to try to address any questions or have some dialogue. Sort of our main point here was just to lay out the topic area with background and the issues to consider as we go forward over the next few months.
Do we have any questions for Andrew?
Sure. On the 0.2 sales tax optional, what kind of funding are you talking there? How much is that? Is that 500 million over 10 years or?
Let's see.
billion?
So if that 0.20 local option sales tax was authorized across the entire Wasatch Front, let's say the 4 Utah, Salt Lake, Davis, and Weber counties, my numbers are a little out of date and rounded, but it would generate in the range of 100 or 110, 120 million dollars per year. And it is statutorily right now mandated or directed to transit specifically. And by the way, it's the statutory authorization to impose that expires in June 30 of 2023.
How does that make up, you gave us the 75, 25, so forth, coming from Fed and coming from state or local.
Yeah.
How does it compare to other states? Does that sit
Yeah.
similar across the country, or is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The basic answer to that question is that in Utah, we rely less on federal funds than just about any other state. I was trying to go back here, but for some reason, here we go. This picture, when you see the yellow or the orange or whatever it is, that slice of federal funding is smaller in Utah than just about every other state in the nation. There are some states that when the IIJA passed, they were so excited because it meant they could sort of turn their transportation investment programs back on. In Utah, one of the reasons that I think that our economy has thrived is because we have collectively made the decision to invest in our infrastructure. Our legislature has done it. You as local governments have done it. And so we principally use the federal funds to maintain the existing infrastructure while we're putting our own funds, our state or local sources, into building out the new infrastructure.
That helps. I just, there was a lot of excitement with the IIJ when it came out from my counterparts with the National League of Cities.
Yeah.
And talking and just celebratory.
Yeah.
And yes, it was a big deal, but it just didn't seem in Utah that it was quite as big a deal.
Yeah, it is a really interesting dynamic. Now, don't get me wrong, it's going to make a huge difference.
Yeah.
When it passed, we thought it would make a bigger difference than we now think it will. Now, at least on the formula, 2/3 of the IIJA is formula funds, meaning we don't have to compete for them; they just come. And basically now that increase in revenue is covering the construction cost inflation, right? So we're not actually able to do a ton. I mean, that's not entirely true, but the majority of it is being eaten up by that. There's new bridge funding that's going to help with off-system bridges around the state. There is an opportunity for us collectively to compete for discretionary grant dollars for local projects, for state projects, and for transit projects. So that is something that collectively we have to work on and make sure that we can compete as effectively as possible. But again, it's not like some other states that basically weren't investing in their systems and then now are able to do so.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for Andrew? Thank you. We'll move forward then.
Can I make one
Yes.
concluding point? And that is that as this dialogue happens through our normal unified transportation plan process, and then also through the legislative process, I just think it's critical for local governments and transportation agencies to be directly involved in that process. You all have needs in your communities, and we have to make sure that the funding approaches that are taken address those needs. And so engaging it, through bodies like this, engaging through those legislative discussions, I think is really important.
Absolutely. Well, all right, let's move on. We it just seems like it was yesterday that we had our board meeting, and took some actions to the TIP, Transportation Improvement Program. There were some approvals made there in your packet. Were there any questions or discussion on those items? Okay, well then we have some new actions that we need to take today. We've got a request from Draper and UDOT in our TIP program. So I'm going to turn the time over to Ben to walk us through these.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I turned this on or off. Was it on, Rosie? Anyway, it's great to be with you today. There are some items. There's actually 3 agenda items that pertain to the Transportation Improvement Program. And as the chair pointed out, this is the suspenseful part. This was, if there was dramatic music in the background, it would be.
Only playing in your head, Ben.
It is currently. I think it's called Run Fast. Anyway, as it comes up, and maybe if it's all right, I'll just walk through and then we'll catch the slides up to us. So the Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP as it's referred to, is a 6-year program of projects that pertain to the highway transit and active transportation projects. And it's important for this body to understand and to recognize that Transcom has that initial responsibility to recommend those projects that move into the Transportation Improvement Program. So today, the actions that will be reviewed is, as the chairs referred to, we had a board mod that took place at the Regional Council. And then we have a board modification that's before you today that we'll go through. And then part of the opportunity that we have today is to review and to receive recommendation from this body to move forward for a public review and comment period for the 2023-2028 Transportation Improvement Program. So the TIP being a 6-year program for highway transit and active transportation projects is for the whole Wasatch Front, from Brigham City essentially down to Utah County. And it's all of the projects that are in the local funded, federal funded, state funded projects. Yes. On my head, then none of the slides are gonna line up with what I'm saying, but the part of that's important in the Transportation Improvement Program is that these projects, and here we are as saving. Perfect. Sweet. So there's the 3 actions we got. Here's the TIP making its debut right before always wants to show off my 3 favorite letters outside of the letters BEN. But these 3 are the next top. So it is a 6-year program. But it's for both of the urban areas, the Ogden-Layton urban areas, the area that exists between Brigham City down to Salt Lake County. And in the Salt Lake West Valley urban area is from essentially Davis County down to Utah County. It's funded with the federal, state, and local funds, and it's for all of the cities, the counties, and Utah and UTA. So the Transportation Improvement Program implements a long-range plan. This is the document that implements the planning that goes on through the Regional Growth Committee. This is the program that will help us meet the short-range needs, and it also is what's necessary to help us maintain our existing transportation system. In the TIP document itself, it'll contain the list of projects, and these are important. We'll review this at the very end with some images here quick, but it includes our new.
Ben,
Yes.
I'm sorry, not to make you
Start
more
over.
upset, I'm gonna pause you because I can see that online, Rosie, online, people are not seeing what we're seeing in the room. They're seeing just the initial blue screen. So sorry, everybody, for the delay, but maybe if there's a way for somebody to share via Zoom or something, So everybody just hang out for 1 second. Give us a moment, okay?
This is what happens when you don't come in person.
Okay, it's cookie break then in the room.
While we wait, does anyone have any updates they'd like to share with us while we go through this cookie break? For those of you online, we are having a cookie break at the moment. Sorry. We hope you're enjoying yours as much as we're enjoying ours.
Mayor, you want to introduce yourself? We missed you at
Yes,
introduction.
we didn't get you an introductions, Mayor.
We use the mic, please.
Joe Smoka from Immigration Canyon Metro Township.
All right, well, no updates. Got a story you want to tell us, Andrew?
I want to hear what's going on in the beautiful city of Bluffdale. How's growth and development in Bluffdale, Mayor Hall? Say that.
I think there was a beautiful baby girl born in Bluffdale.
Oh, you're talking about Miranda's.
Miranda just had her baby.
Yes. Miranda Jones Cox, our government affairs manager, would be here, but she is taking care of her baby, Lucy. That's right. Nice Bluffdale update. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. We were all already on KSL this morning. It stated there was no grocery store in Bluffdale.
That's true.
True. No grocery store in Bluffdale.
You are a grocery desert.
We are a grocery desert.
Well, Clearfield has a new chicken place.
Yes, we do. For those of you that know, chicken, we just opened a Dirty Bird today. About the best chicken I've eaten in a long time. So feel free to come to Clearfield and have some chicken with us. Don't go to Provo because they have one. It's a tiny little store. Come to Clearfield where you can shop and help my tax dollars.
Bluffdale is a population of about 20,000.
And no grocery store.
Yes,
Where are they buying their groceries?
everywhere else.
This, we put this online now, so it won't have any.
Yeah.
That's working. We're good now. But Bluffdale has you can't buy groceries and you don't collect taxes on the purchase of groceries either. Good
However,
stuff.
if they buy their groceries at Walmart and have them delivered,
Gonna kill us on the project.
you do get that sales tax. So just tell them to sign up
Yes,
for
that's
Walmart's
true.
delivery
That's
service.
true. And we are
They-
Amazon fans for
There
sure.
you go. They'll deliver out of some other city and it doesn't matter. You still get
Last
the sales
slides are
tax. So,
sitting on top.
all right, we ready?
right.
We ready, Ben?
Well, yes, unfortunately, the animations will be gone with what we needed to do to get this up so we can work. So when we get into the board modifications, you'll just see the final product each time. But nonetheless, we'll move forward with success here. So we got these are the types of projects that are identified in the Transportation Improvement Program. So in the Transportation Improvement Program, it actually represents hundreds of millions of dollars. $4 to $5 billion worth of projects over the next 5 to 6 years. It represents thousands of jobs along the Wasatch Front. It is essential for our economic growth and development through our communities. It identifies mobility and access to opportunities, the preservation of life, and it promotes the quality of life that we've become accustomed to. So it's a big deal. The Transportation Improvement Program represents quite a bit. Now, by federal law, it's financially constrained. It has to conform to air quality. It needs to be reviewed by the public, and it needs to be approved by the regional council. So all of this is why we have the opportunities to interact on a fairly regular basis. Every time we meet, actually, we get to talk about the TIP. So the board modification that we'll review right now that's before this body is included in your meeting materials. There are tables, and attached to those tables is a resolution that we'll approve. And so actually, this is the tables from the regional council. So we'll jump there. So here's the tables we'll take care of here as this body in Transcom. So this first table identifies 4 projects. The first project on this list is a project on 1300 West. Now this is tricky then too, because some slides are sitting on top. Let me walk around here and if it helps here. So, and you can't see any. So this pink line that disappears behind, that's the project. Intent is to take 1300 East. It's to add additional funding to this project. What it'll do is you can see the existing cross section of the road. It's a narrow 2-lane facility with some shoulder, some locations there's sidewalk, but the intent is to reconstruct and widen this road to a 3-lane facility with shoulder, curb gutter, and sidewalk. In addition to that, it's to construct over here is Highland Drive on the south side of the project, and it goes up to here to where Nashi Lane is. It'll construct a high T intersection there at Highland Drive. This is what a high T is. It allows the through traffic, and then the rest of the movements are controlled by a signal. So it takes care of the volumes of the traffic. But the reason that this project is costing additional funds is because of mobilization costs, the roadway excavation, and various concrete items. Now, this is a Draper City project, and Draper City wants to move forward on this project so that they can advertise it or award it, excuse me, and then they can begin construction this summer. So Draper City is proposing that they bring forward the $1 million for this project, giving us a total project cost of $5.3+ million. The next project in the board modification is a project, this jumps right to the end. This is a project on Bangor Highway. There's actually 2 intersections / interchanges on this particular project. Even the title's hidden on this one. So this is a Bangor interchange at 98 South and 47 South. Initially, when this project was identified, it was to take Bangor Highway over both 98 and over 4700 South. But in the process of working with the communities, this is actually on 114th South. But when working with the communities, it is the intention to take Bangor Highway under the cross streets. Now, this will significantly raise the cost of the project, not only from the difficulties of the project, but from right-of-way and materials. And so the request is to add an additional $147.6 million to this project, bringing this total project cost to a little more than $307 million. The next project is also on Bangor Highway. This project is on 134 South. And again, initially this project, when identified, was to take Bangor Highway over 134. But working with the community, it was identified that they would take Bangor Highway under 134 South. And this, for the same reasons as the other, because of the inflation material costs, the right-of-way, changes to the project scope, The request is to add $46 million to this project for a total project estimated cost of $121 million. The thought came, I could present from my desk on Zoom with that, or just keep going. We good? Okay.
I'm just curious why they make that change.
It's an excellent question. And I
It's a
know,
$200 million question, right? Based on those two.
yes.
Is that, do I understand that right? That you, instead of going over, you go under and now the price has gone up $200 million?
Correct. So these are both examples. In the prior picture, at an example of the 114th almost completed. So this is Bangor, and that's 114th. And this is that same structure, only now you're looking from the south, and this is the same thing being constructed, but the intent is the same. I know Brad Palmer with Region 2 is online here to address some of these questions. The intent is to be, Brad, I'm going to call on you. What's the magic term that you use? It's community sensitive.
Well, there's a number of reasons besides just going under, taking Bangor under the cross street. That's a significant piece of the additional cost, but we're also seeing with the inflation, the labor shortages, all that adding up is contributing to the overall need for the increased cost, not just the going under, but the going under that Ben's talking about is, as you can see in the picture at 114th South, it really limits the segregating the community from side to side. You can still see across the freeway, you can see all the landscaping, the businesses. It's a huge benefit for the communities to not have their city bifurcated basically by the freeway. And so we've done it at a number of interchanges. The cities are very interested in continuing that where we have the opportunity. And really, these are the last few interchanges that we have the opportunity to go under. As we move further to the north, we don't have that anymore. And so we're trying the best we can to try to limit the impacts of these projects to each of those cities.
Is that helpful?
It's a sightline issue pretty much.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Brad. Any other questions on this one?
Mr. Chair, I had a question if it's all right.
Yeah, I had, sorry.
Yeah, Ben, we've approved these in the past. Could you just clarify for us, this additional funding, are these just due to inflation or are these new approvals for ones we haven't approved before to go under the roads?
So these are existing projects that have been a part of the approved TIP and STIP. What we're doing here is amending the amount of funds for the project.
Yeah, could you talk a little more about it? Because, you know, another 150 million, another to total 300 million, that seems like a very big increase just for inflation. Can you talk about the details beyond just inflation costs that might be building into that?
Yes, and if it's all right, Mr. Chair, I'll default to Brad Palmer.
Yeah, definitely.
Brad?
Yeah, so again, it's not just due to inflation. That's a piece of it, but there are significant costs coming from taking Bangor Highway under the cross street. So it's really a combination of everything, the inflation, the change in scope by taking Bangor under. These were originally programmed with taking Bangor Highway over the cross streets, but there is a significant increase to taking them under. But in addition to that, we've seen massive cost increases to materials, to labor, just because of inflation. Up in the, we're talking like 25-30% range on a number of our projects. And these ones, when we redone the estimates recently, that's what we've seen also. So it's a number of things that are causing this, not just one item with inflation. It's also taking it under inflation, labor shortages, everything combined.
Yeah, not to belabor the point, but that was my original question. For this specific intersection, had we not already previously approved and funded the change in scope to go under the road?
No, we had not.
Okay, thank you. That was the question.
Can I, and Ben, if I might just add a little context, not on the project itself, but on the funding, because as we're all noting, these are significant increased dollars. The funding sources for this, and Ben, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, come from the TIF, the Transportation Investment Fund. That's the state fund that is generated principally by state sales tax. That fund, which is programmed by the State Transportation Commission, and I think, do we still have the, as you said, the smart Kevin on with us? Is he still on, Commissioner? No, he's not on with us. Oh, yes, he is. Commissioner Van Tassel is on, so he can correct me also if I go off here. But the Transportation Commission programs the funding that comes through that TIF. The amount of money that's going into the TIF has gone up significantly over the past few years. One, because the economy has been performing very strongly and is generating additional sales taxes, which is putting additional money into the TIF. And then secondly, I noted before, there's been near $2 billion in one-time appropriations that have been put into the TIF. So what you're seeing here, these decisions on these really significant, regionally significant projects in part reflects the dialogue from the Transportation Commission, the state legislature, and UDOT, and the communities about doing the projects right now, do it in the correct way, in the best way now with these additional resources that have been made available.
Thank you, Andrew.
And, I don't want to belabor this, but I guess I already have, so I'll continue. But I mean, the way I understand this is this was a project that was approved for 2 particular intersections, which I totally get in terms of eliminating the stoplights on Bangor and allowing a free flow of traffic. But instead of it going over Bangor, because of community input that involves, we don't want our sight lines to be disturbed across the road, which it sounds like to me that's what it is. We're going to go under at a significant cost increase of say $150 million if you take inflation out. So what process does that go through to actually get it to this committee for approval? I mean, who decides that's a valid use of those funds to make that huge change in engineering and bring it to this committee for approval? Is that a fair question?
I think it's a fair question. I mean, it's Wayne.
I was gonna, so we've had some discussion on this, but this is something that, well, Brad, why don't you walk through the process on that side and then we'll bring it up to where we are today.
Wait, Ben, and I want to hear Brad talk about this, but I just want to make one, this may be a clarifying point also, Mayor, to your point. The state funds that this committee at Transcom considers go through extensive additional process through the state, through the State Transportation Commission, UDOT as an agency, and then the engagement that they do through the environmental processes, working with all of the stakeholders. We as an organization and as a committee, we put a lot more time and focus into the funds that we as an agency are responsible for programming. So that's the STP, CMAQ, and TAP. So every year when we go through and we're really getting into the nitty gritty of projects, that's principally on the federal funds that WFRC programs. Because there's no other process like what I was just describing for those funds. For these funds, these state funds, there's significant additional process just summarized, which Brad, if you want, you can elaborate on, that happens outside of what happens here at Transcom. It's a good question. Brad, do you want to elaborate or add to that?
Yeah, like Andrew mentioned, I mean, we go through the entire environmental process through this, which includes several public meetings. So we gather input from every stakeholder that's willing to participate with us. That's businesses, government, impacted residents, everybody, including those that the general public that can look at the entire STIP and provide comments that way. So we do as much reach out as we can to get as much information we can to make the best decisions that we can that will benefit the community as a whole. So I mean, these decisions aren't made lightly. Like, I guess going back to the original question, we originally programmed these interchanges for Bangor Highway to go up and over the top of the cross streets because that's the cheapest option. It's the most, we can get our biggest bang for our buck that way. But as we start to reach out to these different groups and hear the impacts that an option like that creates, we start to make those considerations. What does this do for those businesses along the corridor? How does this impact, school districts getting those bridges over the top so the kids can cross? Sometimes it moves some of those crossings way out of the way of kids traveling to school. There's a lot of things that we look at as we start to get into the overall design and environmental process of this. I hope that makes sense. If you have follow-up questions, I'd love to try to answer them, but that's kind of the high level generalized answer of how this process works.
Thanks.
This is Mayor Hall. It's my understanding that typically, as you've said, that it would go over for cost. And it's my understanding that there was another city that wanted theirs to go under and contributed funds from their city in order for that to happen. Was that part of the formula here? Was the city requesting, because of residents and other concerns, were they willing to contribute?
Yes, and
okay.
Yes, that's all part of the process. And we're still pretty early in a lot of those negotiations. We just need to get the project moving at this point, but that is definitely happening. And at some point we will have those cities contribute a certain dollar amount to help with this cost. But that hasn't quite been determined yet. We're still working through a lot of negotiations and issues with that. And some of that has to do with utilities and right of way. And there's a lot to it than just talking an actual dollar amount, but definitely those discussions are happening and those contributions will be made.
And this is Wayne Benyon with WFRC staff. Just for clarity, so this is the modification entails adding approximately 150 million to cover cost increases that have been discussed for 4700 South in Bangor, 9800 South in Bangor, and the 134th.
No,
South in Bangor, or no?
134th is 46 million.
In addition to the
addition to
150.
the 147.
So it's a total of 200 million for the three interchanges.
Correct.
Is that correct? I mean, approximately. Okay, thank you.
And I did see 2700 interchange on this list as well.
Yes, we're going to talk about that next. So
Did Kevin Van Tassel have anything else you wanted to add to that?
There are some issues. I mean, we've done a couple of these final approval and we had significant support from the local entity to help put those. We're seeing almost monthly, we're approving additional funds because of inflation, labor, and some of those things on these. But when you start taking a $200 million hit, that means that there's other projects that are going to be delayed without some injection. And so I'm sure we'll spend quite a bit of time on this when it comes up for formal approval.
Okay, Ben, back to you.
wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your help and your input. So then the next board modification before us is one that addresses multiple Bangor highway interchanges. And actually what this does is this does include the 27th West interchange, but it also includes the 134th. It includes the 98 and includes the 47. The intent is to combine all these interchanges into one project pin. What that'll do is that it'll allow the efficiencies in the procurement. It'll also allow flexibility for the consultants that are bidding on the project. And so that'll help us bring down or at least control some of the costs there. So the intent is to add all four of those interchanges under one pin. So that takes all of the money for all of those projects and that brings it into a single project paying of 515 million plus. Any questions on this action? That brings us to the next table, which opens it up for two more projects then to review. The first project from this list is a project on 90th South. This project, at least we're not covering all the lines. This project is a project that goes from Redwood Road all the way up to State Street. What it does is, first of all, it'll add an additional travel lane in each direction between Redwood Road and 7th West. We'll have an additional eastbound and one westbound. It'll also reconstruct from Redwood Road up to 700 West. And then it'll construct a 1-inch mill and overlay from 7th West up to State Street. This project then will also reconstruct the bridge, actually replace the bridge over the Jordan River, and then construct bike lanes from Redwood Road connecting to the bike lanes on 1300 West, which is our north-south bike priority corridor, and bringing those bike lanes all the way up to the Jordan River. This project will also include or install 2 left turns south to eastbound from 7th West on the 90th South. So the intent or the request is to add the additional money for additional scope change on this project, as well as increases to the materials, roadway construction, and right-of-way. So it gives us the total project estimated cost of $56.6 million. The next project then that we have is on I-80 West. This is down at 1000 West. This is actually, there's a bridge on I-80 that goes over the Jordan River Canal. What this will do is remove all of the old asphalt. You can see the bad asphalt on the structure. It's a concrete structure. The old asphalt is beginning to strip off, creating large potholes, which makes it a little hazardous for driving. And so the intent is to take off all the old asphalt and then put down new asphalt over the concrete structure. This project is estimated to cost $170,000. This is a new project to the tip. And this project will be taken care of through Region 2's Transportation Solution Funds. That brings us to the next table, which identifies the last 2 projects in this board modification. The first project is a list of, sugar. All right, this is, you can't use the right colors, anyway. What this was really cool back. Anyway, this is a list of TIF projects, active TIF projects that you can't read. That's kind of mysterious now.
Ben, I'm glad that was the word that came out of your mouth. Thank you. Sugar.
Oh, yeah.
Carry on.
You're so man, so on this particular list, what we have is back in this list of project has come from the TIF active list that UDOT, when they solicit those projects from the local governments that they would like to have funded through the state TIF program. I'm nervous if I'm going to say a wrong word. Anyway, these types of projects require that the project sponsor come forward with at least a 40% match. On this list, there's a list of 21 projects totaling more than $40.4 million. Those projects that are highlighted in that blue color identify those projects that are in the WFRC area, and there's 12 of those. Out of the total active TIF funds or the TIF active list, that there was $24.3 million of TIF active funds that were programmed. In the Wasatch Front area, there was a total project cost of $26+ million in projects. And of those, 15.7 million of those dollars are funded with the TIF active list. Now, the exciting thing about this list that you can't tell now is that some of these match some of the projects that we've actually put money in that this board has approved over the past few years, where we've partially funded projects or identified projects that have gone through our process that are coupled with this to move through to construct. So that was pretty exciting. The same thing is true with the T-tip first last mile. You can't hardly see the list on this one. Anyway, the T-tip projects are those projects that create a barrier for individuals using transit, whether it's from home or it's from work or any other location. And so the first last mile are projects to help with bus stop improvements, with ADA, with sidewalk that's missing. And there's a total of 14 projects programmed for 30.6 plus million, utilizing 18.3 million in the T-tip first last mile. And in the WFRC area, there are 11 projects totaling more than 26.8 million. And that utilizes 16 plus million of the T-tip first last mile projects. I apologize on the picture there. Are there any questions? Both of those lists are included in the meeting materials. That concludes all of the projects in this board modification.
Thank you, Ben. Any further questions for Ben? Hopefully you had a chance to review all of those projects in your board materials. And seeing no questions, then I would entertain a motion to approve those modifications.
I'll make a motion to approve the board modifications.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that is unanimous. And Ben, I'm going to turn this back over to you. Let's talk about the release of the draft. This is a big one.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, Kevin Cromar's got his hand up. Kevin, did
Yeah,
you have a
Mr.
comment?
Chair, I have a question. It might be for Andrew or Wayne. I'm not sure it's directed at. You know, there's a little bit of there's some discomfort with the price tag we were presented with today, and I'm supportive of the modifications today. But what role should Transcom have moving forward? If there's a project we're presented with and we aren't comfortable, or a number of us aren't comfortable with it, what's the appropriate actions we should be considering? What steps should we be going through if there is, in fact, a project we aren't supportive of?
He wants me to answer that. Okay. Yeah, Kevin, thanks for the question. And it's a fair question. If this body were to decide that it was not comfortable approving an action, or it wasn't comfortable without further information or explanation, you don't have to approve it. I mean, that's part of the role that this group plays as the Metropolitan Planning Organization. So, I mean, you did approve it after the dialogue that we had. And you always have the right to ask questions and ask for more information. You can do it, in advance. You can decide not to take an action. You can take the action, but then even, Kevin, request additional information be provided subsequent to the action being taken. All of those are options to you. I think it was good and appropriate, given the nature of these projects, for there to be a robust discussion about this. And I'll note, and now I'm just repeating what Commissioner Van Tassel said, the State Transportation Commission is still going to take action on this. And I would have every expectation that Commissioner Van Tassel, he's paying really close attention to this, that Brad from the region will take back some of the dialogue that we had here in this meeting to the Transportation Commission and to UDOT. And as they're taking their final review of this, that they would consider the dialogue we had here as well. But, back to the original, as I laid it out, this body has that right to approve or not approve anything that's presented to it.
This is Tammy Tran, Mayor Tran. I have a question. So if this body decided to not approve something, then what happens?
Well, now, when you make sure I'm doing this right, but if we did not approve the modification to a project in the tip, then that modified scope could not proceed. I mean, it's as simple as that. Under federal law, now I'm looking to Ivan from FHWA, under federal law, in order for these projects to proceed, they have to be included in the tip. That's the MPO. We're the Metropolitan Planning Organization. We adopt the tip, the Transportation Improvement Program. And it has to be included in the STIP. That's the statewide Transportation Improvement Program. So there's a lot of process involved in the expenditure of these big dollars. So Mayor Tran, if we didn't approve it, the project with that modified scope would not be able to proceed. Ivan, Ivan, did you want to supplement that?
Yeah, let me just add to that, Andrew. The one caveat here is that there are no federal funds on this project. Therefore, I'm not exactly sure what, aside from not approving the STIP, when it comes around, I'm not sure what other action we could take on any of this.
There are no federal funds in this project. However, it's on a regionally significant facility. And so I think Andrew's correct that there would be a delay while these issues were being talked through and considered by the State Transportation Commission and Federal Highway.
Andrew, or whoever's, Kevin Van Tassel, I have a couple of comments to make. I want to make sure that I heard and understood that we still have a lot of work on these projects before they're going to come before the commission. Is that right? Somebody said, I thought I heard that. Maybe I want to make sure I.
Brad, from UDOT, could you address the commissioner's question, please?
Yeah, these are actually scheduled to be on the agenda for next week's meeting, Commissioner. And so you will see them next Friday.
Okay, so you'll have all your work and we'll be able to tear into it at that time.
That's correct, yes.
I just want to make the group aware that I'm not opposed to it, but I'm not committing that I'll continue to, that I'll make for the final approval. But it's been a good discussion. I've been glad to be a part of it.
Thank you.
How the dollars stack up.
Just one, I'm sorry, may I, Mr. Chair, just sort of one maybe concluding point on this. I think it's fair to say, while this is probably not an official policy, that there may be degrees of deference that a committee like this would utilize depending on the nature of a project and the funding sources. So as I said before, what we're looking at is projects that WFRC as an organization has the primary responsibility for programming. We're going to look at it really, really carefully. That's the STP, CMAQ, and TAP. If there's a project like this one, which is funded entirely with state funds on a state road, as Ivan noted, has no federal funds in it, I think it's fair that we would give a significant degree of deference to the state entities working in conjunction with the local communities that are directly affected. That does not mean that we just approve it without scrutiny. And I think what this committee has done today, asking tough questions, is appropriate. And I just appreciate Commissioner Van Tassel's point that they would take into consideration some of the issues in the dialogue that we had here today as they go and do their deeper dive even in fulfilling their responsibility of programming state funds as the State Transportation Commission.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew.
I have a question
Yes, ma'am.
regarding the active, with all the small projects on the awesome slide we couldn't read.
Yeah.
But it's in our notes, it's in our email. So just for clarification, the MPO for, I'm seeing Vernal and I'm seeing Cedar City and I'm seeing some areas that don't fit within Wasatch Regional Front. So can you explain that for me?
Do you see the color? Do you see the colors on yours? The colored are within our area. Is
Okay.
that correct, Ben?
Correct.
Those are the ones
So-
we're actually.
That we are approving, we're not approving
Correct.
the other ones, but you show them all.
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay.
part of that, Mayor, so that you have a whole list when they're talking dollar values and you wonder what happened to the other portion of the money. You're aware of where those funds are, but we are approving only those in our area.
Thank you for the clarification.
All right, Ben, we're gonna go right back to you then.
Wonderful, thank you. And to preference my remarks, and I apologize on that. I feel that a lot of the technical difficulties with the slides explaining some of those projects may have caused more of the confusion or difficulty in understanding the projects to help them. So I apologize that to you and to the department on that. But moving forward, here we go with the release of the 2023-2028 Transportation Improvement Program to the public. And you're not going to see any of the documents because they're all stacked out nice and neat on the desk here. But underneath this particular document, there are 3 other documents that are part of the information that'll go out for the public review and comment. What we have is we have a table that identifies all of the projects that Transcom has made over the years, as well as the brand new ones recommended to the regional council that have been approved as part of the TIP or part of the draft TIP. There's also a table that identifies all the projects that are funded with other funds, with other federal funds, with other state funds that are included in the TIP. And then there's a table that identifies all the projects that the transit agency takes the lead in programming and coordinating. Those documents, along with the air quality memorandum, are the documents that will go out for the public review and comment. And part of that is going to happen. Man, see, here you see the whole day planner all at once, no dynamics. So here we are. We have the 16th, that's today. And so our intent today is to request that we go out for public review and comment on the 25th of June. And that'll conclude on the 30th of July. During that period of time, on July 6th, we'll have a public open house in the Salt Lake Intermodal Center. On July 13th, we'll have a public open house at the Ogden Intermodal Center. On the 27th of July, we meet with the technical advisory committees and we'll review any information that we received during the public review and comment period. We compile that with the remaining 3 days and we bring that information to Transcom on the 18th for a summary of the comments, for all the comments and any information for your review, and then for your recommendation to the regional council that they approve the 2023-2028 Transportation Improvement Program. That takes place on the 25th of August. At that time, our documents get combined with the other 3 MPOs in the state. So there's Dixie, there's MAG, and then there's Cash, Wasatch Front, and then UDOT, who takes care of all the other states outside of an MPO area. And it's all wrapped together in a statewide transportation plan, and that goes to review for federal highways and federal transit agencies to review that and then approve that. And that is the first week of October, we will have the new 2023-2028 Transportation Improvement Program. Then just this dark blue line underneath here is to remind you that our next process starts before this one concludes, but we'll begin that in August on preparing for the 2024-2029 TIP. So this will go pretty fast because what we were going to do is go onto the webpage and we were going to see cool what a WFRC webpage looks like. And then we were going to go into the tip section and then we were going to come into our interactive map. And this is our interactive map. So we'll jump right to the end. So when you get onto the web page and can go into the web interactive map, you can click on any one of these roads. And like here, we clicked on Hooper's project up
Ben,
there.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you want Rosie to stop sharing? And I mean, I could share my screen and
No,
and
this will be all right because
carry
we'll go
on.
faster.
Okay, go ahead. Thanks.
So what we get to have now is because of the talents of Matt Silsky here in our office, we've got a Google Street View that we can drop right down on the project and you can look at the project. So you can click a project, you can go look at it, scroll around, look at all the surrounding. Then you can put the contact information for a comment on the project, and that's stored. And that information is what we'll bring back to you, the comments that we collect. So as part of that document, it'll include the STP projects, and that we were going to get both the urban areas, and underneath that, you would see a map of the urbanized area, and that's where these projects we would look at. Well, what does that include? Well, it includes projects that we've already reviewed and approved, like this project up in Perry, where we'll connect 1100 South via 11th West to 12th West there in Perry. Estimated project is $5+ million. But when we worked with the city and that, they identified that, hey, we can actually, if we get 2.7 plus, we can make this happen. So this body recommended the 2.7 plus, and this project's in the tip to move forward. Another one there, just to review, is the one here in West Valley in Magna. This is on 7200 South, or West, sorry. This is a road that's lived long beyond its years. This road is more gravel than road, but it's been an awesome facility. But now it's time to rebuild, to reconstruct. It'll put the sidewalks where the sidewalk don't exist. It'll put curb gutter. It'll put in the shoulders and bike lanes. This project estimated was $7+ million. Funds requested was 6.6. Working with the communities, it was identified that, hey, if we can put 4.7 plus, can you make it happen? Absolutely. And this body recommended that. And so this project is another one of those projects that's in the tip. Well, then we look at some of our CMAQ projects. We've got a trail in Riverton, which is commuter related type trail for school as well as recreation. For those who are going to the new Costco and the buildups that are around it. We've got the Green Bike program expanding in Ogden and Salt Lake. We've got an intersection that's offset in West Point. And then we've got the downtown mobility hub in Salt Lake on 200 South. These projects are additional projects that are in the program. Well, what about the TAP? Well, the TAP's got a lot of projects this year. It was awesome. We were able to program more TAP than we have in the past since this program began in 2014. We've got a project here in Centerville. What this project will do is take the pedestrian crossing at Parish Lane and I-15 and dovetail it right into the Legacy Parkway Trail there. This body recommended this project. This is on the tip, the review. And then we've got an opportunity here to where we were working with the Department of Transportation on 700 East. This is between Parley's Trail and Liberty Park, so about 20th South to 7th East. To 13th South. Anyway, this board recommended the $1 million of the TAP funds, and while we were at it, we recommended 1.5 million of STP funds so that we can have this shared use path between these two locations running along 700 East, which is a very large and a very busy facility. So another amazing project in the tip for your review. Well, then we've got, this is the tail end, it is a golf course. This is on the West Davis corridor. In the other picture, I actually had the tractors and dump trucks moving around, but the West Davis is a new capacity project that's in the tip. We've got a whole list. Then we jump right to the end of the bike ped facilities. What a combo. So we've got all of these bike pedestrians. Somewhere in between here, underneath all those layers here, we've got transit capital, operation and maintenance. We've got your the pavement, all the other projects. Oh, dang, this was my, so if you're wondering what to do between the June 25th and July 30th, sit down with your loved ones. This actually moved around here. Sit down and take a look, pull it up online and check out some of the projects that are in the tip. Give us some comments. Let us know what some of the concerns are. Yeah, that's a good idea. No, I don't like that one. Or how about if we do this and we make some changes? But this body has that responsibility. This document is significant to the development of our mobility system along the Wasatch Front. So I'm grateful for all that you do. Thank you for your patience. But if we could get some direction from you that we can go out now for public review and comment, that would be awesome.
Thank you, Ben. We appreciate you working through all the technical difficulties. It was still entertaining, even without slide movement. We're okay.
Thank you.
We then need to board a Well, the requested action just disappeared. We just need a motion to approve the release of the draft.
Mayor Lang, so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. Well, we've got a guest here with us today, and I'm going to turn the time over to Wayne to kind of introduce our last item on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to welcome Robert Miles, the Director of Traffic and Safety at UDOT, and Jeff Lewis, who's also in kind of Robert's right-hand man in the Traffic and Safety Division. And they're going to talk a bit about some trends that have been observed in that are concerning in the transportation safety world. And then we'll have Hugh Van Wagenen and myself with the WFRC staff. Hugh is going to talk about a few elements of street design that local governments can employ to improve safety on your streets. And then I'll follow it up. I'll follow Hugh with some information on a new funding opportunity that's part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Thanks.
We appreciate your time today. We guarantee numbers, maybe not as much energy as Ben, but we do guarantee numbers for you. So let's dig into what we've got with some safety trends. When I get stuck, I'm going to turn to Jeff and ask him to bail me out. Hopefully this computer's rebooted at this point. So. Is it coming, Rosie? Okay, so we've got here. Okay, let's talk about some perspective. Undoubtedly, or hopefully, I'm not sure which word to use on that. We've all heard about what's happening on our roadways with safety. And the story doesn't look really great the last few years. So I'd like to introduce a little bit of context. Right, a lot of folks spend a lot of time, a lot of careers trying to improve our roadway system, make it safer, make it better. And we have had some success. This is what life is like in a bigger scheme of things. This is Utah data, okay? The dark or the blue is our VMT level, okay? Orange line is Utah fatality rate. So number of fatalities we have per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. The blue line, you can see in the background here, the darker blue, that is the national average for VMT. Then there's a gray line in there, that's our Utah crash rate, number of crashes we have per 1 million vehicle miles traveled. So I should have warned you, I'm an engineer and I speak in numbers a lot. So what this tells me is we've made progress, and you can all see that. But what it doesn't really speak directly is the amount of progress we've made. Last year, we lost 328 people on our roadways. Okay, that's about my graduating class from high school. But it's not good. It's not where we want to be. It's higher than we've been in the recent history. However, that represents 0.96 fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. That's still in the lower end of our national numbers. If we were performing, if we processed the same number of vehicle miles traveled on our roadways we did last year at the same rate we did in, what's my magic number here? The same rate we did in 2000, we would have had 567 fatalities last year. If we processed that, and I think it's like 34.14 billion miles traveled, whatever it is out there. If we process that same number of vehicle miles traveled at the rate we did in 1980, it would have been 1,000 fatalities last year. So we are not where we want to be, but keep heart. It is worth it to be in this fight. We are making progress. Okay. Let's see. a little bit, this is what it looks like in the near term for us, right? We've been sitting under the national average since about 2000. That's when we crossed over. Before 2000, we were bouncing above and below the national average. More than half the years we were above the national average on BMT traveled, or fatalities per BMT traveled. In 2000, we crossed over and we've been down in the lower half. In 2019, we were in the top 5 in the nation. The only states ahead of us in 2019 were Minnesota, Vermont. I shouldn't have started that list if I don't know the whole list, but we had our target of folks we were chasing, the people we want to be better than. So we're still keeping an eye on that. We're currently in the top 10. We're all going to get better on this. Okay. And this is how we look based on our surrounding Intermountain area. Again, on this line, the dark blue is the national average. The orange is our UDOT fatality rates from 1994 through 2019. The reason that's not current is not all states have data processed at the same rate we do. Thanks to everybody's work out here, all your law enforcement agencies out there, everybody's staffs, we can pull better data than other folks. We have a lower fatality rate than anybody else in the Intermountain West. Okay, so take heart. Things aren't great, but we've shown in the past we can do great things and we can improve, and we will continue to do that in the future. A few more details here. What we've done, Jeff's group did is they took our fatalities and suspected serious injuries for the last 12 years. The 2022 data is year to date as of yesterday morning, Jeff, this morning. Yesterday morning. So these are just those fatalities and suspected serious injuries that happen on arterial, collector, and local road streets. So arterials and below. That's the larger graph is statewide, excuse me, the larger bar. The lower bar here, the smaller bar, that's just in the WFRC area. So WFRC area accounts for about 40 to 50% of our crashes and fatalities in the state, right? That's it. It's a big business area right here. It's a big opportunity for improvement. Very simple, oranges are fatalities.
Robert?
Yes, sir.
Can I just that's interesting because our area represents a larger percentage of the state's population than the percentage of the crashes.
Mm-hmm.
So
per mile traveled, you are generally safer to be on a urbanized area roadway than out on a rural area roadway per mile traveled. Okay, so we can talk about that. And I'm an engineer, which means, again, I speak in numbers and generally don't do really well with words. If you have questions or you want some engineers to talk to us, anything we produce today is easily producible for your specific jurisdiction. We'd be happy to help out. We have tools that are available for your staffs to use without us there. We'd be happy to give lessons on those. Whatever we can do to help out, we want to be there to help the communities out. So that I'll make that offer multiple times here. Andrew, did I cut off your, did I give you a good answer on that, Andrew, or do you more? Okay, thank you. So again, we're moving along. Not a lot of change in pattern here. You can see the general drift with what we've seen since 2019, 20, 21, 22. That represents the growth we've seen since COVID. And so that is not a local phenomenon. Most states, most areas are battling that. The one area locally that seems to have not had this pattern as much is Wyoming, actually, and I can't figure that out. But this pattern, we've seen a change, right? We don't know exactly why. There's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of theories out there, and we can get into that in just a little bit. But we as a traveling public have changed our behaviors a bit. When you break that down on bicyclists, fatalities and suspected serious injuries, this is what our load looks like statewide and for the WFRC area each year. So we generally are running, we average around 6 to 7 bicyclist fatalities a year in the state, more than we want, right? We're always we're focusing on that as well, but that's what we look like around the state, and a fair number of those are in the WFRC area. Okay, not all of them, but a fair number are. Pedestrians. This one bothers me a lot. When it comes to pedestrians, we currently run, well, the last few years, we've been running about 40 pedestrian fatalities per year. About 15% of our fatality load in the state, pedestrians. Right? Well, when you do pedestrians and bikes, it's about 15. It's about 13 and a half if it's just pedestrians. That's what our numbers look like statewide per year and what they look like in the WFRC area. You can see that band has grown, if you will, here. I know that was awesome pointing for everybody online. I don't know if you can see that or not, but what I'm pointing at is 2010 through about 2013, 2014 area. We go from hovering in the mid to upper 20s to wishing we could see the 20s again. Right? We've seen a change in those pedestrian behaviors or pedestrian not behaviors, excuse me, those pedestrian fatalities since about 2014, and we haven't seen ourselves come back down as a state. We are continuing to work on ideas, things we can do with that. There's a lot of pressure out there to make a difference on this. This means something. These are people. These aren't just numbers. These are people. These are moms, dads, sons, daughters, brothers and sisters. So we wanted to point that out for everybody. A large portion of those or percentage of those is in the WFRC area. Again, we could dig into those a little more if you would like, and we'll present this for, it will break this down for any community that would like to have it broken down. One of the things that we focus on, and I think that makes us a little bit different, is for quite a while, we've tried to look at fatalities and roadway behavior from more than just an engineering lens. I want to stress more than just, we do look at it through an engineering lens, but we also look at it through behavior, through education, through law enforcement, through whatever else we can do to get the message out there. There is a study out there that often gets misquoted and gets argued about human behavior and its impact on fatalities. The long story short is you can say that about 94% of the things that happen on the roadway have some effect, are affected in some way by our human behavior. Whether it's the primary cause or a contributory cause, the way we behave does make a difference out there. So to ignore us, I think, is to not take an entire picture of what's happening out there. 5 biggest behaviors that we look at: driving alert, making sure that we're driving focused, driving calm, drive sober, and drive buckled up. Okay. Driving alert. This is what our crash and fatality distribution looks like statewide and WFRC. And again, these are just fatal and serious injury crashes around the state for WFRC and statewide over time. This is driving alert. So the amount of distraction we have in our vehicles, whether that is handling a phone, eating a burger, combing our hair, shaving, reading the newspaper, watching a video, whatever insane things you would never imagine would show up in that list. That's kind of what's happening to our society. It's happening to the people we love out there.
Robert, I'm not going to ask you to explain this for every one of these slides, but just to be clear, the 2 colors is statewide and then the WFRC area.
Yes.
So for everybody here, you know, the smaller bars are your communities. And it's just really interesting because you were showing the sort of distinction before that the WFRC area represented in total just shy of a majority. But then for this one, for Drive Alert, the WFRC area represents a much smaller percentage. And so there's just, you know, there's probably a whole reason, there's a whole list of reasons why on any one category in the more urbanized areas, you'd have less of an issue than you would in the more rural areas, and that varies. So I mean, I'm not necessarily asking you to explain that, but it's just worth noting. It's
We
interesting.
have some very talented professors in the state writing an awful lot of very good papers on those type of variations, and I'm trying to understand why. What do we see? For distraction, this is historically very underrepresented. Nobody likes to admit you were distracted when the officer pulls you over. We know, soft know, we anecdotally know that this number is underrepresented in our crash records because it's hard for officers to prove distraction once something has happened. Right? It just is. When you get caught doing something wrong, a lot of people, probably not the people in this room, but a lot of people will not be completely forthcoming in how they messed up. Right? So driving alert. Oh, I've messed up on that.
Yeah,
I
Robert, I was just going to
apologize.
say, because the
Thanks, Jeff.
titles are a little misleading. Drive alert, this refers to drowsy driving.
Yep.
In about 3 slides, the drive focused slide will refer to distracted driving.
Thanks, Jeff. We recently underwent a branding change to try and make these more positive, encouraging things instead of don't drive drowsy. And my engineer mind, I'm not really great with English sometimes, so I apologize. I just gave you my spiel on distracted driving, and this is really drowsy driving, which also can be tough to prove in fatality instances. If nobody's around to say what happened, then the officer has to determine whether or not they believe someone fell asleep, or whether or not they were distracted, or whether or not they were some other fill in the blank.
But that actually makes a lot of sense. Longer in rural areas, people drive longer distances. Oftentimes roads aren't lit as well, so that could be part of the explanation.
It does. Andrew, I apologize. I will do better. I'll try not to make any more mistakes today.
Are you feeling sleepy?
A little bit, but. Okay, driving buckled. This is the proportionality. This is what we've got. I want to draw attention to 2020, 2021, and 2022, and I'm going to do that on the next 4 slides. You can see the increasing trend statewide and locally. We are changing our behavior. When it comes to driving buckled, here's some cold hard facts for us. The state of Utah, our surveys, our field surveys show that about 90% of us buckle up. That's just field observation studies. It's going out, looking at random communities, studying it year to year, we're about 90%. When we look at our fatality crash reports, about 50% of those fatalities, people that die in crashes, about 50% of them are buckled and 50% are not. So my engineering mind says, how many people do we have in this room? We have 18 people in this room, okay? Let's make it an even 20, just because I'm not that good with math. 90% of 20 is 18. So 18 of us can handle, will host 50% of the state's fatalities within that population of 18. And we'll figure out how to assign that out. If those 2 individuals that represent the 10% of people that don't buckle up, they're going to hold the other 50% of the fatalities. They're going to host them in their little camp. Those are numbers. That's just what we see, right? Buckling up is important, and we're seeing fewer people buckle up and more crashes involving buckling up or failure to buckle up. Driving calm, again, our patterns 2020, 2021, 2022 increased the number of crashes and fatalities statewide involving people driving aggressively or not driving calmly. Okay. Driving focused, pattern is holding kind of steady here. This one is tough to actually judge because it's not well reported within the crash record.
Just a quick clarifying. So
Yeah.
the driving calm, is that one captures the speeding? Is that right?
Let me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the drive calm, that captures the aggressive and speeding. Aggressive driving and speeding is included in that.
Did that handle? Did Jeff answer your question?
Yeah, that does. I mean, and part of the question there is just that this is where you see those big spikes in the recent couple of years. I mean, there's a COVID effect that seems to be happening here.
I want to point out again that this data we're looking at is really, we pulled out the interstates, the freeways, the larger roads that tend to be the UDOT roads. This is really what's happening on our more localized system. Okay, so even there, we're seeing these behaviors happen. Okay, driving focused, again, distracted. You see the change in behavior in the statewide numbers on the total number of fatal and serious injury crashes that are occurring. We've changed the trend. It has been higher in the past, but that trend still exists. That pattern still is existing here. Driving sober. The pattern is right. That's right there. 2020, 2021, 2022. Right. This is driving sober is not just whether or not you've consumed alcohol. It's whether or not we're driving and how we're treating medications. And those medications may very well have been prescribed in a very sterile environment by a man or woman or wearing a white coat that said doctor on it. You know, it's on the up and up, but it's how we behave and how we actually consume those medications. We have to keep an eye on that as a population. That heavy equipment it talks about on the medicine bottle, that's your car. It's not just a bulldozer. It's your truck, it's your car as well. So, okay, and then speed related. This is specifically speed related, not the other ways we could interpret aggressive driving. But again, we can see that pattern in 2020, 2021, and 2022 year to date, that increasing pattern. And it exists on the statewide and in the WFRC subset. Okay. All right, that's the numbers we had to throw at you guys to try and share what we see out there happening. Are there any questions we could try and answer for you? Okay.
Thanks, Robert.
Not seeing any. Again, if your staffs, if you have engineering staff that would like access to the tools for this, please reach out. We'll get them for them.
Tough to follow Robert there. Again, I'm Hugh with WFRC staff. And what I'm going to speak to you today about is just a little bit more on street design. Robert mentioned a lot of those figures we just looked at were, local facilities, not state necessarily. And, hit a lot on human behavior. One of the things that the safe systems approach that the HWA is really trying to promote these days is an assumption that we as humans make mistakes while we're moving through our transportation system. And with that assumption in mind, what can we do in our roadway design to limit the amount of serious injuries and fatalities that are going to happen to get them to zero, right? Zero fatalities, road to zero, all sorts of different things you can call it, to avoid really the tragedy, right, of somebody just trying to get somewhere and not arriving. So this is these things, I'll speak primarily looking at pedestrians and people biking, and Robert presented some of those numbers. And if you think in context, if we can protect people that are walking and biking, that's also going to make our streets safer for people in their cars, right? And a lot of that has to do with, quick, there it went, a little bit of a delay. So just looking at our street design. Now, you can look at these two images and just by a quick glance, you can probably guess which one has higher speeds, which one has lower speeds, which one protects somebody walking and biking more based on the speed of cars and also other elements like street parking, center median trees, buildings that are closer to the street that all play a factor in one, separating vulnerable road users, people biking and walking, and also the speed of vehicles. And so these three graphs here, they speak to speed, not necessarily speeding, right? Not the same thing. And you can see that, 20 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour, 40 miles per hour, the risk of a fatality to a pedestrian getting hit at those speeds just really jumps up. And this is not speaking to serious injuries. This is just fatalities. If you look at the serious injuries that can occur, which again, also, that is a life-changing event for folks forever. These numbers jump way up. So when you increase your speed while you're driving, it also increases the reaction time you have to see a conflict in the road, which is seen in the upper right corner of this graph, and the braking distance, which you have to stop. Once you recognize the conflict, how much time does it then take for you to stop? And again, 20, 30, 40 miles per hour really starts to jump up. And these are not uncommon speeds, of course, on any of our local roads. Same thing as you increase your speed, your ability to see anything in your cone of vision really decreases, again, affecting that reaction time and ability to prevent a tragic incident. So speed makes a difference. So what are some things we can do to control speeding on our roads? There are a number of design elements out there. I'm just going to spin through these, but I want you to know that they are there and these are available, for your engineers, your municipality, your public works folks to look at in context, places where you want to slow vehicle speeds down. Medians, pinch points, chicanes. We don't see a lot of these around, but they do exist. Lane shift, where you switch parking from one side of the street to the other and make people just maneuver through that, slows people down. Speed humps, narrow two-way streets where you really have to negotiate with somebody coming in a low volume, low speed neighborhood to get through that space rather than, oh, I have my lane and I'm just going. Bringing those building lines closer to the street, again, it creates a bit of visual friction and slows people down. Street trees can play a big role. Even on-street parking is an appropriate technique in certain circumstances. There are also roundabouts, traffic diverters that make sure traffic isn't cutting through in certain areas, but it's still permeable or allows people walking and biking to get through. And then even your signal progression and the timing of those signals, that if people are going the appropriate speed, the speed you want them to go, that's when they're going to hit those green lights rather than speeding from red to red. So those are some speed reduction mechanisms. Just again, slow traffic down. Because again, that speed matters. There we go. Thanks, Rosie. Some other things that are really important to take into consideration. How do we separate and protect, again, people walking and biking to get them further away from vehicular traffic and give them more time to be reacted to? Separate them, right? This bridge that we can see in the left image here over Mountain View Corridor, along the Mountain View Corridor Trail. We don't even put pedestrians and cyclists crossing the roadway. They're up over the top. Protected bike lanes, I'll talk a little bit more about here in just 1 second. Chokers or bulb out the intersections do a number of things, make the distance crossing for pedestrians a lot shorter so they can get through that conflict zone. It makes the pedestrian, as they're out on that corner bulb out, more visible to people driving and people making right-hand turns in their cars. It also makes them slow down. And so again, they have that time to react. And then there's, again, talking about signal timing, a lot of ability to let pedestrians and cyclists go before traffic at intersections, again, so they can get out ahead and be visible prior to other traffic moving through that intersection. Just looking at protected bike lanes, this is really going to be the gold standard if you want to protect not only bicyclists or people on bikes, but also people walking, and I'll tell you why. In this little graphic here, you can see the bike lane that to the left of it is a concrete median, essentially, right? It's a curb sitting out there, and so again, protects that person on a bike from moving traffic. In this image, they also have parking next to the travel lane, next to that curb. So if for some reason somebody was out of control, had fallen asleep at the wheel or was under the influence, what are they going to hit first? They're going to hit that parked car first, right? Before they even get to the median. If for some reason you didn't want to, you could do a full concrete curb through there. Well, you can do concrete planter boxes every so often, right? The same idea, you have that parking protection there. And for some reason you can't even afford that, well, at least just do parking, right? Without any of those other interventions, and that's still a protection that makes it safer for that person on a bike. And what does it do for people on the sidewalk? You can see how much further they are removed from vehicular traffic as well when these things are put in place. Again, just examples. And then also when it comes to crossing the road for pedestrians, number of examples here of treatments that are proven countermeasures that make it safer for people to cross the street, make them more visible, make them only cross one lane of traffic at a time if they have a refuge island and appropriate markings and lights. So there are a lot of options available to your communities to take advantage of, to make it safer for these folks. So my last slide here is a composite image of a roadway in Provo. Is formerly known as Bulldog Boulevard until high school was moved and then became Cougar Boulevard. This is a little stretch of road, not a state facility. This is a local road between State Street and University Avenue, 2 state routes, and was an incredibly dangerous roadway and primarily for cars. There were a ton of crashes along this stretch of road. It's really short. And so safety redesign was put in place. And you can see the image on the left is the original roadway, image on the right. You can see a little bit of green paint. That is the protected bike lane areas. They have again, a bike lane median with some vegetation there for protected bike lane, separating it from vehicular traffic. The center median prevents dangerous left turn movements by vehicles along this stretch of road, and also provides visual friction to slow traffic down. And so this has been a project in Provo that has not only improved the safety of pedestrians and people riding their bikes, but also for cars, and the crash rate has gone down significantly here with this redesign. So again, just to emphasize, speed matters, protect people walking and biking, and a lot of different treatments out there depending on the context of your roadway and your corridor for your community. Thank you.
So Robert and Jeff have shared some information that kind of gives you context about the safety picture, especially in Utah and the Wasatch Front area. Hugh has talked about some street design elements that can be incorporated on streets owned by local governments. I'm going to finish up here with just a very brief overview of funding opportunity that is exclusively for local governments. And this is one of the discretionary grant programs called Safe Streets and Roads for All. That's part of that was authorized as part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And the specific objective of the program is to make safety improvements that reduce fatalities and serious injuries. In order to compete for this discretionary grant program nationwide, there has to be in place, or the entity that applies for these funds, which is going to be a local government, needs to draw projects and strategies from a comprehensive safety action plan. And the success rate, or the federal government is saying that you're more likely to compete well for these funds if you're part of a regional or multi-jurisdictional effort. So at the request of some local governments in the region, WFRC is undertaking to work with several local governments, a few experts from UDOT and from UTA, to submit a grant to apply by September 15th for some of this discretionary funding to develop a comprehensive safety action plan for the entire 6-county region of WFRC. And Kip Billings in our office, whom many of you have met, is leading this effort. And the intent is to get an action plan in place as soon as possible. Solid action plan that's responsive to the selection criteria outlined in the notice of funding opportunity, so that local governments will be able to apply in subsequent years for this funding to make safety improvements in their communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Any questions for Wayne? Well, all right. Well, Andrew, any other business? No. Andrea? No. Okay, our next meeting is Thursday, August 18th. We'll be back here, and we just then need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for being here.